At 52, I thought I had it all. Corner office, seven-figure salary, handshakes that moved markets. Then I opened the wedding invitation from my only daughter and read the line that shattered my world. Father of the bride, not applicable. I stared at those words, thinking it was a mistake. But it wasn't. It was deliberate. It was a verdict. And in that moment, I realized I had spent 3 decades building a legacy in boardrooms while letting my own family drift into silence. I had flown across oceans to close deals, but hadn't crossed a hallway to ask my daughter how her day was. Emma used to wait by the door for me, tiny feet pacing, drawing pictures to welcome me home. But I always came late. Or not at all. I'd say, "We'll have time this weekend." Then the weekend became next year. Now she's walking down the aisle. And I'm not beside her. Not even in the photo. I wasn't there when she needed a hand. So she learned to walk alone. What happened next forced me to decide. Was I going to fade into the background, a name forgotten in family stories? Or fight, not for forgiveness, but for the right to be present? If you've ever believed success could wait but family couldn't, or you think you're too late to fix what's broken, stay with me. This story might just help you before someone writes your name under not applicable. My name is Thomas Whitaker. I'm 52 years old, and I used to believe I had cracked the American dream wide open. I grew up in a town no one visits twice. Dusty Oklahoma farmland, where every dollar was stretched until it tore. My father worked the fields sunup to sundown. My mother cleaned houses to keep the lights on. I remember watching her hands crack from bleach and cold water, her back always bent, her smile always tight. It wasn't a life. It was survival in slow motion. By the time I turned 17, I made myself a vow. I would never live like that. And more importantly, my family, my future wife, my children, would never live like that either. I clawed my way into college on a patchwork of scholarships and side hustles. Economics fascinated me, not because of theory, but because it seemed like the language of power. I devoured everything I could about markets, investment, strategy. I didn't just want to earn money. I wanted to master it. Then I met Sarah. She was studying social work, had a laugh that could stop traffic, and a presence that made everything feel softer. I was all ambition and sharp edges. She was calm and depth. We dated through our final year. I proposed 2 weeks before graduation. She said yes with tears in her eyes and a whisper in my ear. Let's build something different. We got married at 24. In a church so small the photographer had to step outside to get us all in the frame. We had nothing but hope, a second-hand couch, and matching drive. She worked with kids in foster care. I started as a junior analyst at a regional investment firm. We didn't have much, but we had balance. We'd eat frozen pizza at 10 p.m. after long days and talk about the future. On weekends, we'd hike the local trails, imagining what our house would look like one day. Sarah always said she wanted a porch swing, and I promised her she'd have it. Emma came 3 years later. She arrived early, screaming and red-faced, and changed everything. I didn't know my heart could expand that fast. I held her in the hospital room, stunned by how small she was, how perfect. I told Sarah, she'll never feel what we felt growing up. I swear it. It wasn't just a promise. It became a mission. I threw myself into work harder than ever. I wasn't just working for promotions. I was working for Emma's future. When I got my first bonus, I put it all into a college fund. When I got promoted to senior analyst, I took on longer hours without hesitation. Sarah was supportive. She believed in my drive, and she knew I meant well. I missed Emma's first fever, though, and her first step. I had been on a client retreat in Chicago. Sarah called me with a smile in her voice. "She walked today, Tom, across the whole living room." I laughed and said, "That's incredible." Then I booked another meeting. I told myself I'd make it up later. That became a pattern. The firm expanded. I was offered a stake if I could bring in more accounts. I did. Then came partnerships, conferences, roundtables with millionaires asking for my opinion. I was 34 and being called a rising titan. I was the guy other guys wanted to be, and I still made it home when I could. Birthdays, Christmas, sometimes weekends. I told Sarah, "It's just this phase. Once I hit VP, things will ease up." She nodded, though I noticed she no longer asked when I'd be home. I chalked it up to understanding. When Emma turned 7, she drew a picture of our family for school. Sarah, her, and the dog were in full color. I was a stick figure in the corner, with a briefcase. She didn't mean anything by it, but I framed it anyway, thought it was funny. Now, looking back, it was a warning sign, one I laughed off. By then, I had convinced myself that everything I was doing was for them. Every missed dinner, every forgotten recital, every canceled weekend trip. I was building the life they deserved. But somewhere in the rush to protect my family from the poverty of my past, I had begun starving them emotionally in the present. And I didn't see it. Not then. Emma's first birthday fell on a Thursday. I remember because I had just landed a massive contract with a pharmaceutical firm looking to expand their portfolio into sustainable healthcare. It was my first solo negotiation, and I nailed it. The numbers were historic. My phone lit up with congratulations, bonuses were promised, and my name was added to a shortlist for partner track. I missed the cake, the tiny hat, the candle I promised I'd light. Sarah sent me a photo, Emma with frosting on her nose, clapping as everyone sang. I stared at it from the back of a taxi in Manhattan and told myself this was a one-time thing. I'd bring home a giant teddy bear and a charm bracelet to make it up. That would do it. When I got home late that night, Sarah didn't yell. She just asked, "Was it worth it?" And I, without hesitation, said, "It's for us. For her. Everything I'm doing is for this family." She looked at me the way someone looks at a stranger in their own home. Not angry, not sad, just distant. That was the beginning of the drift. Emma, at 2, didn't ask questions, but by 3 she started waiting by the window. At 4, she asked, "Will Daddy be here for bedtime?" Sometimes I was. Most times I wasn't. I promised I'd be there for her dance recital, that I'd take her to the zoo on Sunday, that we'd build that birdhouse she'd been talking about. But there was always a client in crisis, a meeting that couldn't wait, a flight I had to catch. "We'll do it next week," I'd say. Next week for sure. Next week never came. Sarah adjusted. She stopped waiting for me to read the bedtime stories and started recording them herself. She became the planner, the nurse, the tutor, the disciplinarian, the cheerleader. She filled the space I left behind with fierce resilience, but she was tired. I could see it in the way she'd pause before speaking, as if debating whether it was worth telling me something if I'd be too distracted to listen. Emma, too, adapted. Kids do that. They figure out who's present and who's not. She stopped asking if I'd come, stopped waiting at the door. When I did show up, her reaction was polite but cautious, like she didn't quite know how to behave around me anymore. One Saturday, I came home early, unannounced. I wanted to surprise them. Sarah was folding laundry, and Emma was drawing at the kitchen table. I stepped in and said, "Guess who's home?" Emma looked up, blinked, and said, "Oh, hi, Daddy," then turned back to her crayons. That small moment gutted me, but I buried it, like I buried everything else that didn't fit the narrative I had built. That I was the provider, the foundation, the reason this family had a future. Sarah didn't confront me directly. Not often. When she did, it was gentle, a soft-spoken, "You're missing her, grow up," or "She needs you, not just your money." And I'd answer the same way every time. "I'm building something here. Just give me a little more time. She'll understand one day." I even believed it. I started justifying everything. Quality time over quantity, I'd say, as if one big family vacation made up for 50 missed dinners. "She'll thank me when she's older," I'd mutter while packing for another red-eye flight. "Other dads work hard too," I'd remind myself whenever guilt began to creep in. But deep down, something in me knew. I knew that while I was winning in boardrooms, I was losing at home. That my presence was becoming optional, even intrusive. One night, Sarah asked, "Do you even know what her favorite color is now?" I opened my mouth, confident I'd say pink. She shook her head. "It's green. Changed last year. You missed that too." I didn't respond. What could I say? That I was busy closing a merger? That the new account required weekends? The truth was simple and cruel. I had stopped being part of their everyday. And every day is where relationships live or die. From the outside, we looked perfect. Nice house, smiling holiday cards, Emma in private school, Sarah volunteering at the local shelter. But inside, we were 3 people sharing a roof, not a life. And worst of all, I didn't see the full cost. Not yet. By 42, I was named vice president of the firm. The title came with perks: my own floor, a company car, executive dining privileges, and a salary that could have funded my entire hometown's school district. We moved into a house with 5 bedrooms, marble countertops, and a backyard big enough to host weddings. Sarah finally got her porch swing, though she never sat in it. Emma got the room she always dreamed of, painted green, her new favorite color. I made sure it had a telescope, a piano, and shelves full of books. I bought her everything she once asked for, and a few things she never did. But every evening, the dinner table had 3 plates. One always stayed clean. I told myself it was the price of leadership. That being indispensable at work meant being absent at home. That Sarah understood, and Emma would thank me later. Then, one Friday afternoon, Emma knocked on my study door. She was 10, holding a hand-drawn invitation to her school recital, a pastel blue flyer, stars around her name. "Will you come?" she asked. I was on a call with Tokyo. I put the phone on mute. "Of course, sweetheart. Wouldn't miss it." She smiled, small but hopeful. "It's next Thursday, at 6, I nodded. "Already on my calendar." It wasn't. Thursday came. I was in a conference room with international clients, negotiating terms for a joint venture. Time slipped. My phone buzzed, Sarah's text. "It's starting." I replied, "On my way," but I wasn't. Not really. Not until an hour later. When I got home, Emma was on the couch, still in her recital dress, flipping channels without watching, her face blank. I knelt beside her. "Sweetie, I'm so sorry. The meeting ran long." She didn't look at me. "It's okay, Dad. You don't have to come next time." My heart dropped. "Emma, of course I want to come." She shrugged. You always say that. But I don't expect it anymore. Then she stood and walked away. That single moment hurt more than any financial loss I'd ever faced. But instead of sitting in that pain, I did what I had trained myself to do. Bury it under numbers, spreadsheets, progress. The next day, I doubled my hours, picked up another portfolio, told myself I'd book a weekend trip for the family. We never took it. Success had become my language. The more hollow things felt at home, the more I leaned into professional victories. I became addicted to approval. Quarterly wins, handshakes, plaques, headlines calling me visionary. At a gala dinner, they gave me a Crystal Award for Innovator of the Year. Cameras flashed, champagne flowed. I smiled for pictures, then excused myself to the rooftop terrace. I called Sarah, no answer. I tried again. Voicemail, so I left a message. Tell Emma I'm bringing home something special. I was. The award. When I walked into the house past midnight, both were asleep. I placed the trophy on the kitchen counter, beside a note in Sarah's handwriting. Emma had a nightmare. Asked for you. I told her you were busy changing the world. I stared at that note until dawn, and yet, I didn't stop. I was stuck in a loop. Each missed moment created guilt. Guilt drove me to overperform. Overperformance led to more absence. More absence meant more distance. I convinced myself I was indispensable to the firm, to our financial future. But I had become irrelevant in my own home. Sarah and I spoke less. Our conversations became logistical, school fees, schedules, bills. She stopped asking how I was, stopped telling me how she felt, and I didn't ask. One Sunday, while organizing paperwork, I found a drawing Emma had made, a family tree for school. It had 3 branches, Mom, me, and our dog. Dad wasn't there. At the bottom, in her handwriting, he's part of the roots. You just don't see him anymore. I stared at those words, unsure if she meant them as poetic or cutting. Maybe both. But I didn't confront her. Or Sarah. I just folded the paper and put it in my drawer, next to receipts and forgotten tax forms. I didn't realize it then, but I was no longer leading a family. I was funding one. Sarah never said the words, but over time she stopped expecting me to be her partner. She paid the bills, scheduled the dentist appointments, signed the report cards, handled the insurance. When the water heater broke, she found a plumber. When the roof leaked, she climbed up to tarp it herself. When Emma caught the flu in 2nd grade, Sarah stayed up 3 nights straight with a damp cloth on her daughter's forehead. I was in Singapore closing a tech acquisition. She never called to complain. She stopped asking when I'd be home. At some point, she learned to do everything without checking if I could help. Not because she wanted to, but because she had to. And that's the cruel thing about neglect. It doesn't create loud explosions. It creates silence, stillness, substitutions. She learned to parent alone while still married. At school, teachers came to recognize Sarah's face, not mine. Emma's paperwork listed her as the sole emergency contact. Every time they filled out father's name, Sarah left it blank. Not out of anger, but because no one ever used it. Emma adjusted too. She stopped bringing me crafts, stopped asking me to play. When she was little, she used to run into my arms whenever I walked through the door. Now, by age 11, she barely looked up from her tablet. One night I came home early, a rare miracle, and found Sarah helping Emma with a science project. Diagrams, glitter, careful handwriting. I stepped in, trying to join. Looks like a solar system. Emma glanced up. It's a cell structure, Dad. Oh, right, of course. She turned back to her poster. "You can go work. We're almost done." Sarah didn't say anything. Her silence said enough. Emma never asked me to attend parent-teacher conferences. I assumed Sarah had it covered. She always did. But years later, I found out the truth. Emma had once been teased by classmates, not for her clothes, not for her grades, but because their dads showed up for school events, and hers didn't. They called her the CEO's ghost kid. One boy said, "Maybe your dad's just embarrassed to be seen with you." She came home crying. Sarah comforted her, wrote a letter to the principal, followed up. All while I was presenting at an investors' summit in Atlanta, talking about community development. No one told me. Not because they wanted to hide it, but because by then I had become an outsider to pain, a tourist in my own family's life. Emma grew sharper over time, not unkind, but practiced in detachment. She was polite, respectful, but careful, as if I might vanish mid-sentence. And the thing is, I often did. One evening, she asked Sarah if she could change her last name on social media. "It's just online," she said. "It's confusing when people search Emma Whitaker and find news about hedge funds and mergers." Sarah hesitated. "Are you embarrassed?" Emma replied, "No, I just want to be me, not an extension of Dad's resume." When Sarah told me later, I laughed it off. Teenagers. They all want independence. But it wasn't rebellion. It was a resignation. And Sarah, she stopped trying to pull me back. Her texts became fewer, our calls shorter, our hugs mechanical. She became warm to others, cool to me. She still wore her ring, but not always. On one occasion, we attended a family friend's wedding. Sarah danced with Emma. I stood alone, holding a drink, realizing I didn't know the song playing, or the name of Emma's best friend, or the last book she read. Later that night, Sarah said, "You know what the hardest part is?" "What?" "I can't even be mad anymore. I just adjusted. That scares me." I didn't respond, because deep down, I was scared too. I had created a house with walls so high, even I couldn't climb back in. And Emma, she didn't slam doors or scream. She simply evolved without me. Her laughs didn't include me. Her milestones didn't require me. I saw the shift most clearly one afternoon when I got home early again, unannounced. Emma and Sarah were on the porch swing, talking and laughing. I stepped outside, trying to join. They paused, smiled politely, scooted over. But the rhythm was gone. I wasn't part of the inside jokes. I didn't know the stories. I was just a guest visiting between meetings. That's when I realized they had become a unit, and I was the shadow they had learned to live without. Emma's high school graduation was on a Saturday in early June. The air was thick with summer, and Sarah had spent days preparing, ironing Emma's gown, organizing a small celebration, even digging out old photo albums for a memory board. I was in Zurich. A Swiss firm was offering our company a merger deal that would put us in the global top 10. The board insisted I lead the final negotiations. The dates conflicted, but I told Sarah, "It's just one event. I'll make it up to her." She didn't argue. She just blinked once, slow and tired. "She's going to remember this." I laughed it off. "She'll be fine. I'll video call before she walks." But the Wi-Fi at the hotel cut out. By the time I called, it was over. Emma didn't answer. Sarah picked up, her voice sharp. "Don't bother. She's in her room. Hasn't said a word since we got home." I overnighted a bouquet of lilies and a white gold necklace, small, elegant, something I imagined she'd wear to college interviews. I included a note. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. Love, Dad. The box was returned unopened. Emma didn't speak to me for 3 weeks. When she finally did, it wasn't a phone call. It was an email. 4 paragraphs, carefully written, no typos, no exclamation marks, just raw honesty. She wrote about watching her classmates hug their fathers, about scanning the crowd for a face she knew wouldn't be there, about realizing that even on one of the biggest days of her life, I chose a boardroom over a bleacher seat. I don't hate you, she wrote. I just don't feel you're mine anymore. She ended with, I used to imagine you in the audience when I was nervous. Now I imagine you missing it, and I prepare for the silence. I stared at the screen for 15 minutes. Then I typed, I'm sorry. You'll understand one day. That was all I said, and I told myself it was enough. That being firm was good parenting, that she'd see the bigger picture later. But deep down, I knew. I had missed the bigger picture entirely. Sarah filed for divorce 2 months later. The papers arrived on my desk while I was reviewing quarterly projections. I opened the envelope like it was another contract to review. There was no surprise, just resignation. She had waited long enough. Waited through birthdays, flu seasons, school plays, first crushes, heartbreaks, driving lessons, all without me. I called her that night. Are you sure this is what you want? She sighed. I stopped wanting anything from you a long time ago. Still, I didn't fight it. I offered a settlement, made sure Emma and Sarah kept the house, paid the legal fees, efficient, clean, like another transaction. But there were moments, small ones, that tried to shake me. One evening, I saw a photo on Sarah's social media. Emma, smiling wide, standing between Sarah and Sarah's sister. The caption read, "Proud of this girl. She's grown so strong." I wasn't tagged. I wasn't mentioned. I didn't recognize the dress she wore or the restaurant behind them. Another time, I ran into Emma at the grocery store. She was home from college for a weekend. I reached for a cart, and there she was, grown, confident, scanning a shopping list. "Emma," I said, surprised. She looked up, paused, then nodded. "Hi, Dad." No hug, no warmth, just civility. As if I were a professor or neighbor, a man once close, now irrelevant. "I didn't know you were in town," I said. "I don't usually tell you." Her voice wasn't cruel, just flat. We talked for 3 minutes. Then she said, "I need to finish this. Mom's waiting." And she walked away. I stood in that aisle for 10 more minutes, staring at cereal boxes, wondering how many other small chances I had missed. There were more, like the time she invited Sarah to speak at her college's Women in Leadership event. I only found out through a LinkedIn post, or the time she published a short story in the university journal. A tale about a girl with a famous father and a silent heart. I read it twice before realizing it was about us. Every one of those moments was a flare in the dark, an invitation to notice, to ask, to reconnect. And I didn't. Not because I didn't care, but because I assumed I had time, that the door, no matter how often I ignored it, would always open. It never occurred to me that one day she'd stop knocking. Emma chose a university 3 states away, a small liberal arts college nestled in the mountains of Vermont. Quiet, beautiful, just far enough to make weekend visits inconvenient. I offered to help her move in. She declined. "She wants to do it with just me," Sarah said gently over the phone. Said it'd be simpler. I asked if I could at least come for orientation. Silence. Then Sarah added, "Let's not make this harder than it already is." So I wired money. Tuition, housing, a laptop, even a year's worth of meal credits. I ordered a custom leather-bound planner with her initials embossed in gold. Had it delivered to her dorm before she arrived. She never said thank you. I told myself she was overwhelmed, adjusting, figuring out who she was outside of home. I rationalized her distance the way I always had. Convenient truths that shielded me from guilt. Sarah and I still spoke occasionally, mostly through email or brief calls. Her tone had changed. No longer sharp or emotional, just functional. Emma's adjusting well. She made the dean's list. She's volunteering at the campus bookstore. She dyed her hair. She's dating someone. Each update felt like a courtesy, not a connection. One day, Sarah sent a scanned copy of a health insurance form that needed my approval. Emma's name was there, but her last name had changed. She had dropped Whitaker. She used Sarah's maiden name now. It wasn't a legal change, just a preference for campus documents, email, student ID, but it hit like a hammer. I stared at the file for an hour before signing it. Then I closed the laptop and poured a drink. I didn't call. I didn't ask why. I didn't demand an explanation. Instead, I told myself, she's young. She's figuring things out. It's not permanent. But deep down, I knew a child doesn't erase her father's name unless something inside her has already gone silent. Sarah never brought it up, and I never asked. Months passed. I sent birthday gifts, holiday cards, care packages during exam season. Most went unanswered. Once I mailed her a framed photo of the three of us, taken during a beach trip when she was 7. I included a note. Remember this day? You found that seashell and made us keep it in the freezer for months. No reply. Not even a call. Later, I heard from Sarah that Emma had given the frame to a thrift store near campus. She said it didn't feel like her life anymore. That line haunted me. Didn't feel like her life. Who was I in her world now? A provider? A relic? A story she barely told? Emma came home once that year, for a long weekend. I rearranged meetings to be there. Bought her favorite ice cream, stocked the fridge with the pasta she used to love, even replaced the dead porch light she always complained about. When I walked through the door Friday evening, the house was empty. Sarah texted, "She's staying with a friend." I asked if I could see her. No response. On Sunday, I saw them through the kitchen window. Sarah and Emma in the garden laughing about something. I stepped outside. Emma looked up. Her smile dropped. She stood, brushed her jeans, and said, "I have to pack." "Emma," I began. She shook her head. "Don't. Please." Then she walked past me without another word. I stood there, the cold wind brushing my face, realizing I hadn't hugged my daughter in over a year. I couldn't remember the last time I'd said, "I love you," and heard it back. Still, I didn't confront her. I didn't sit her down. I didn't push. I told myself, she's just hurt. She'll come around. Time heals. But time wasn't healing anything. It was burying it deeper. Later that night, Sarah said something that finally cracked the shell I'd been hiding inside. "She's not angry anymore, you know." I looked up. "She's not." Sarah shook her head. "Anger needs connection. She's past that." "So what is she now?" "Indifferent." That word echoed. Indifference is colder than rage. Rage means you still matter. Indifference means you're invisible. And I had let myself fade without even fighting for the light. But even then, I didn't act. Because denial, once worn long enough, feels like truth. It arrived in a cream-colored envelope, thick and textured, the kind reserved for formal events. I didn't recognize the handwriting on the front. Clean, careful, unfamiliar. I opened it at the kitchen counter, my coffee still steaming beside me. Inside was a wedding invitation. Emma's name was written in elegant gold script. Emma Grace Mathers, not Whitaker. The man beside her name was someone I'd never met. The ceremony was in early September, at a vineyard 2 hours north of Boston. The design was tasteful, minimal. It looked like something out of a bridal magazine. I scanned for my name, for some small note, a post-it even. Can we talk? Hope you can come. Anything. But there was nothing. I looked again, and then I saw it. Near the bottom, under the section titled Bridal Party and Ceremony Details, it read, Father of the Bride, not applicable. The words were bold, black, unmistakable. Not missing, not unlisted, not applicable. I read them again and again, until the words blurred. It wasn't just absence, it was erasure. I felt something crack. Quietly, but completely. As if a part of me that had held out hope had finally admitted defeat. I picked up the phone and called Sarah. She answered on the second ring. Did you know? I asked, my voice low, uncertain. There was a pause. Then calmly, yes. You knew she was getting married and didn't tell me? She asked me not to. I gripped the edge of the counter. Why? Sarah's voice stayed even, not cruel, but resolute. Because she's inviting the people who were present in her life. Not just biologically, actually present. I stood there, unable to speak. My breath caught somewhere between anger and grief. You could have warned me, I said finally. I'm not here to soften the truth anymore, Thomas. That's part of the problem. I hung up without another word. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at the invitation, at my daughter's name beside a stranger's, at my absence printed and formalized. All those missed birthdays, unanswered emails, forgotten promises, they had been cumulative. I'd always thought the door would stay open, that blood would be enough to keep me tethered. But it wasn't. That evening, I searched online. Her fiancé was a teacher. They met in a community development course. She had taken his last name, Mathers, on every public listing. I found a wedding website. It included bios, engagement photos, fun facts about the couple. Under parents of the bride, there was only one name, Sarah Lane. My name wasn't even a footnote. I scrolled through images. Emma smiling in a field of lavender, twirling in a simple white dress. She looked radiant, whole, complete, without me. I thought about the nights I stayed up working, believing success would buy me time. I thought about the cell structure project I'd mistaken for a solar system, the recital I never attended, the graduation I missed. Every one of those choices was a brick in the wall she'd finally finished building. This wasn't anger. It was conclusion. She had drawn a line between her past and future, and left me on the other side. I called her once. Just once. It went to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. What could I have possibly said? That I was sorry? That I didn't know it would come to this? That I thought she'd always be waiting? Even I couldn't believe that anymore. Later that night, I poured a drink and laid the invitation flat on my desk. I stared at those 4 words. Father of the bride. Not applicable. I whispered them out loud, let them hang in the air like a verdict. And for the first time in my life, I didn't try to justify, explain, or correct. I simply accepted them. Because the truth was, she was right. I hadn't been there. And maybe now, I no longer had the right to be. I hadn't seen Sarah in almost 3 years. We agreed to meet at a quiet cafe halfway between our cities. Neutral ground. She arrived on time, still carrying that calm grace I remembered. A woman who had learned, long ago, to manage storms without flinching. I stood when she approached. She gave a polite nod, but no smile. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I said, "I got the invitation. I figured you would." I looked at her, searching for something. Anger, regret, hesitation. But her eyes were steady. Tired, maybe, but unshaken. "I need to understand," I said quietly. She set her coffee down. "Understand what, Thomas? Why you weren't invited? Why she listed you as not applicable?" I nodded, ashamed. "She didn't do that to hurt you," Sarah said. "She did it to be honest." I swallowed hard. "Does she hate me?" Sarah leaned back, folded her arms. "No, she doesn't hate you." Relief almost touched me until she added, "She stopped feeling anything towards you a long time ago." That sentence landed like a stone in my chest. "I don't believe that," I whispered. "She spent years missing you, hoping you'd call, show up, ask the right questions. You didn't. So she stopped waiting. Then she stopped hoping. Eventually, she stopped caring. She's my daughter." Sarah nodded. She was also a little girl sitting on the stairs every night, hoping to hear the front door open. I tried to speak, but Sarah continued. "You want the truth?" she said, voice tightening. "You missed the big things, yes, but it's the little things that killed it." She started listing them. You missed her first piano recital, her first breakup. You didn't know when she got braces. You never saw the scar on her knee from the bike fall. You weren't there when she lost her best friend to cancer and cried herself to sleep for a week. I looked down, hands trembling. "She stopped telling you about her life," Sarah added, "because you kept showing her you didn't want to be in it." My mouth was dry. "I didn't mean—" "I know," Sarah said. "You meant well. You always did." She paused, then dropped the weight. "She tried to take her life at 19. I froze. "What?" Sarah nodded, tears rising. "It was during her second year. Finals. Loneliness. A boy she loved broke things off. But really, it was years of feeling invisible, of being told, in 1,000 silent ways, that she didn't matter enough." My throat closed. "Why didn't you tell me?" "She begged me not to. Said she didn't want pity, and she knew you'd send flowers." I looked at her in disbelief. "Sarah, she wrote you a letter after that. Told me she did. 4 pages long, poured everything out." I shook my head. "I never got it. She never sent it. She tore it up." I pressed my hands to my face, trying to breathe. "I had no idea," I whispered. "That's the point," Sarah said. "You didn't know. You didn't ask." Silence fell between us. Finally, I said, "Who am I to her now?" Sarah studied me. "A man she once loved. A man she once waited for. Now? I think you're a name on a birth certificate she's learning to forget." I winced. "But," Sarah added softly, "I also think part of her still wishes she didn't have to feel that way." That flicker of hope ignited something in me. "What do I do?" Sarah stared into her coffee. "That's not for me to answer. But I'll say this, Emma doesn't need grand apologies. She needs truth, consistency, proof you're finally listening." I nodded slowly. Sarah stood, gathering her bag. "You wanted the truth, Thomas. Now you have it." She started to walk away, then paused. "You can still change how this story ends," she said without turning. "But you're not the narrator anymore. She is." And with that, she left me sitting in a cafe filled with quiet chatter, holding a truth I'd ignored for far too long. That night, I drove to the old house, the one Sarah and Emma still lived in. My name was no longer on the deed, but part of me hoped the front porch light still remembered me. Sarah had taken Emma out of town for final wedding preparations. The house was empty, quiet. I still had the spare key. I didn't plan to enter. But something pulled me in. Guilt, maybe, or fear that this would be my last glimpse of a life I had forfeited. I walked slowly through the hall, past the family photos lining the walls. Some I remembered. Others I'd never seen. Photos of Emma at her school plays, at science fairs, at birthday dinners. In each one, she smiled, radiant, alive. And I wasn't in any of them. Not one. I climbed the stairs and paused outside her bedroom. The door was half open, as if waiting. I stepped inside. Her room hadn't changed much. Neat. Minimal. But there was a shelf on the far wall I'd never noticed before, tucked behind a bookcase, barely visible. I reached for the box sitting on it. Inside were cards. Dozens of them. Unopened birthday cards I had sent over the years, each still sealed, some slightly bent at the corners. There were also letters, my own handwriting, apology notes from missed events. Sorry I missed your recital. Let's have dinner soon. Next time, I promise. All stacked neatly, untouched. And then I saw them. Family photos, old ones, some had been cut, literally. My face sliced out, leaving awkward holes in group shots. Others were folded in half, bent to crop me out. But none of them were thrown away. They were kept in a box marked private, not destroyed, not forgotten, stored. And suddenly I understood. This wasn't anger. It wasn't even rebellion. It was grief. Chronic. Lingering. Unresolved. She had mourned me long before I realized I was gone. I sat on the edge of her bed, holding one of the folded pictures, Emma in pigtails, sitting on my shoulders at a beach I could barely remember. She looked happy. I looked elsewhere. Phone in hand, head turned, a moment I missed even while I was in it. I put the photo down and walked to her desk. There, tucked between two books, was a torn piece of paper, handwritten, sharp ink strokes. It read, "Dear Dad, I don't hate you. I just stopped needing you. But sometimes, I still wish you'd walk through that door and say, I finally see you." It wasn't dated. It wasn't signed. But I knew it was her. And I knew why she never sent it. Because she didn't believe I'd read it. Or that I'd care. I fell to my knees. For the first time in 20 years, I cried. Not quiet tears. Not dignified grief, but soul-deep sobs that bent my spine and stole my breath. I cried for every bedtime I'd missed, every lie I'd told myself, every time I chose a meeting over a memory. I cried because I finally saw her, not just as a daughter I had failed, but as a child who had once believed I was her whole world. And I let her down. I stayed there on the floor of her room, the walls closing in with every memory I had buried. I had been a provider, a success, a name people respected. But I hadn't been a father. Not really. I had earned promotions, but not forgiveness. And now, I wasn't sure I deserved it. Still, one truth echoed louder than my shame. If there was even the faintest chance to change things, to matter again, even a little, I had to start now, because I had already missed too much. And the next thing I missed might be forever. Monday morning, I walked into my office for the last time. The view from the 32nd floor stretched across the city. Crisp skyline, movement below, the hum of industry. I'd once looked at this scene and felt invincible. Now it felt like a cage. My assistant greeted me with a list of calls. My inbox blinked with new contracts. A major pharmaceutical company had just approved a multi-million-dollar proposal. There was a bonus coming, a possible board seat. I opened a blank email, subject, effective immediately. I wrote my resignation in 5 short lines. No drama, no excuses, just the truth. I no longer wanted a seat at this table, because the table that mattered, the one in my daughter's life, no longer had a chair for me. I sent it. Then I canceled every upcoming engagement. I called my private clients and politely explained that I would no longer be offering services. Some were shocked. Some were angry. A few understood. I didn't care. I packed up my office into one small box. A photo of Emma as a toddler. A Father's Day mug she gave me when she was 5. A notebook of personal goals I hadn't opened in years. I left the award plaques on the wall. Let someone else polish them. That afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote my first letter. Dear Emma, I know you have no reason to believe me. I've failed you more times than I can count. But I need you to know this. I see you now. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm not asking for trust. I haven't earned it. I just want you to know I'm trying. Love, Dad. I sealed the envelope, wrote her name in careful, deliberate script, and mailed it. The next week, I wrote another, then another. Every Sunday, without fail, I wrote her by hand. No email, no phone calls, just ink, paper, and the patience I should have had years ago. At first, there was no response. Not even silence. Just absence. So I called Sarah, asked if she'd be willing to forward them in case Emma had moved. She still gets them, Sarah said. She reads some. Others she doesn't open. I took that as a start. A month passed, then 2. The 5th letter came back in pieces, burned at the edges, stuffed in a new envelope with no return address. No note. I held it in my hands, staring at the singed paper. I could still see parts of my handwriting, warped and blackened. I didn't get angry. I wrote another letter, this one shorter. Dear Emma, you don't have to read these. You can burn them, tear them, toss them, but I'll keep writing. Not because I expect a reply, but because this is what I should have done all along. Show up. Every week, every page. I'll be here. Love, Dad. The act of writing became ritual. I woke early on Sundays, brewed coffee, and wrote with the window open. It was the most honest part of my week. I told her about memories, moments I remembered now with painful clarity. I told her about the first time she said "da-da," how she used to hum when she slept, how she once asked me if clouds had feelings. I told her I was scared, that I didn't know if this would ever lead to healing, but that I'd keep trying anyway. Some letters went unopened. Others, Sarah told me, sat on her desk for weeks before disappearing. She wasn't ignoring me. She was watching, waiting. And in the meantime, I dismantled the life that had kept me from her. I sold the luxury car, bought a used truck, canceled the club membership, started walking to the grocery store. I gave up consulting, began volunteering at a local literacy program. Nothing flashy, just quiet work that felt like presence, not performance. I turned the home office into a reading room, filled it with books she loved as a child, set up a space in case she ever wanted to visit. I knew she wouldn't, not yet, but building that space felt like planting a seed. Sarah noticed. You're different, she said during one of our brief check-ins. I'm trying to be. She nodded. She's still angry. I know. She has every right. I know that too. Sarah looked at me for a long time. Keep writing? I smiled, small and tired. I will. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing results. I was building consistency. And maybe, just maybe, Emma would feel that. Even if she never said a word. 3 months after I started writing, Emma replied. It wasn't a letter, it wasn't a call. It was a text. One sentence, delivered at 2:17 a.m. Too late. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, thumb hovering over a dozen replies I would never send. Too late. Not stop writing, not leave me alone. Just a line that landed like a verdict. But I didn't stop. Instead, I changed course. Sarah had once mentioned Emma volunteered at a local center for orphaned and displaced children, a quiet organization on the edge of town. I found their website, signed up for orientation, and filled out the background checks without hesitation. I didn't go there to ambush her. I didn't expect a moment of reconciliation by the juice station or a teary hug in the hallway. I went to show up. Week after week, I folded laundry, packed food boxes, helped with math tutoring. The children didn't care who I used to be. They only cared that I was present, that I listened, that I remembered names and brought extra snacks on Thursdays. 3 weeks in, I saw her. Emma stood across the room, crouched beside a young girl with tangled hair, showing her how to braid string into a friendship bracelet. She glanced up. Our eyes met. She blinked once, then looked away. She didn't approach me, didn't ask why I was there, but she didn't leave either. The next week, she was there again, and the week after. One afternoon, I was restocking books when I turned around and found her standing behind me. "Why are you here?" she asked. I looked at her. Older now, stronger, guarded. A woman who'd had to build walls too young. "I'm volunteering," I said. "There are other places you could do that." "I know." She crossed her arms. "You think a few letters and folding laundry makes up for everything?" "No." She stepped closer. "Do you think showing up now erases the years you weren't?" "No," I said again. "It doesn't erase anything." Her voice dropped to a whisper sharp as glass. 25 years, Dad. 25. You missed everything." "I know." She shook her head. "No, you don't." I wanted to say more, wanted to explain, to tell her I was different now. But I didn't. Because excuses, even well-intended ones, are just another form of absence. So I stood there, letting her words burn through me. She turned to leave, then paused. "Don't follow me," she said. "I won't." She walked away. But she didn't quit the center. Neither did I. Weeks passed. Our interactions were brief, if they happened at all. Sometimes a nod. Once, a thank you when I handed her a box. Nothing warm, nothing encouraging, but still, something. I kept writing the letters. One Sunday, I included a story. Not about her, but about me. A moment from my childhood when I watched my father skip my baseball game for overtime at the plant. How I told myself, when I grow up, I'll do it differently. I ended the letter with one line. I became the man I once promised myself I'd never be. I didn't hear back, but I noticed her glance linger longer at the center. Once, I caught her reading a book I'd left on the shared shelf, a memoir about rebuilding broken relationships. Another time, she asked someone else for help with lifting boxes, even though I was standing right there. She didn't want my help, but she didn't leave the room either. Then, one Thursday, after the kids had gone home, I stayed late to mop the floors. She was locking cabinets. Out of nowhere, she said, "Do you know my middle name?" I looked up, startled. She stared at me, arms crossed. I hesitated. She waited, and I didn't know. She nodded. Exactly. I wanted to cry, or apologize, or collapse. But all I said was, "I want to." She didn't respond. She turned, grabbed her bag, and walked out the door. The next letter I wrote began, Emma Grace. I know now. Because I had looked it up. Not just the name, but everything. Her childhood milestones, her college essays, the poetry contest she won in ninth grade, the research project she co-led in college. I found them all, and I read every word. Because learning about her now was the only way to show her I finally understood what it meant to be present. Not loud, not grand, just consistent. The envelope was simple. White, unadorned, no return address. Inside was a card. No handwritten note, just a printed line. If you still want to come to the wedding, you can. Sit in the last row. There was no signature. But I knew the handwriting on the envelope. Emma's. I held the card in my hands for a long time, rereading the sentence again and again. There was no warmth in those words, no affection. But they weren't rejection either. They were a test, and I didn't hesitate. I booked the flight, reserved a modest room nearby. I didn't tell Sarah, I didn't call Emma, I didn't ask for more. I bought a plain gray suit, no pocket square, no bold tie, something that wouldn't draw attention, something that matched what I was, a quiet presence on the periphery. On the day of the wedding, I arrived an hour early. The vineyard was beautiful, rolling hills, soft music, rows of white chairs set beneath blooming arbors. Guests trickled in, laughing, greeting, dressed in pastels and polished shoes. I stayed in the back, as instructed. The ceremony started on time. Emma walked down the aisle, arm in arm with Sarah. She wore a simple gown, elegant and understated, just like her mother. Her hair was pulled back, face calm. She looked radiant and grown. I hadn't seen her in a dress since she was 16. I hadn't seen her smile like that, guarded but real, in years. As she passed my row, her eyes flickered sideways, just for a second. Not a pause, not a smile, but a glance, a moment of acknowledgement. And for me, it was everything. I didn't cry, not then. I just sat there, spine straight, hands folded, taking it all in. I watched her exchange vows, heard her laugh softly at something her fiancé whispered. I saw the way her shoulders relaxed as he took her hands, like she had finally found someone who wouldn't forget to show up. At the reception, I didn't stay long. I slipped a small envelope into the card box. Inside was a letter, one final page for the day. Emma Grace, thank you. You didn't have to invite me. You didn't have to let me see the woman you've become. But you did, and I will never forget it. No matter where I sit, I will always be proud of you. Love, Dad. I left before the dancing began. Back at the hotel, I sat in silence. No music, no television, just the memory of her glance like a crack in a wall that had stood too long. The next morning, I found a photo on the wedding website. Candid shots from the ceremony. In one, Emma and her husband were laughing, mid-toast. In the background, blurred but unmistakable, I was there, seated in the last row. Still, I was in the frame. A week later, a letter arrived, short, typed, signed at the bottom. I saw you. Thank you for not making it about you. That mattered. Emma, no salutation, no closing, just the message. But I read it 100 times. Because it meant something had shifted. Over the next few months, things didn't change drastically. She didn't start calling. We didn't meet for lunch. But she stopped returning my letters unopened. Sometimes, she even underlined a sentence in reply and wrote a note in the margins. This was true, or I remember this, or simply, yes. Once, she sent me a photo. A picture of her as a child, sitting on my shoulders, holding a balloon. No message, just the image. A memory offered, not with warmth, but without bitterness. And that, for us, was progress. I kept writing, kept volunteering, kept showing up. Sometimes Sarah would update me. Emma's asking questions about you. Or, she said she might send you something next week. One day, a package arrived. Inside was a book, one of her favorites, dog-eared, annotated. Tucked inside was a sticky note. If you want to understand me, start here. That night I read the first 3 chapters, and I started writing again. This time not to say I'm sorry, but to ask real questions. What did you see in this character? What made you underline this passage? Was this chapter hard for you? And slowly, Emma responded, not like a daughter returning to a father, but like a woman deciding, in her own time, whether to offer space for one. And every word from her was a thread in the seam of something not yet whole, but no longer broken. The building wasn't large, just a renovated brick storefront on the east side of town, next to a laundromat and across from a used bookstore. But to me it was a cathedral. The sign above the door read, "The Whitaker Center for Single Parent Support." We offered financial coaching, resume help, childcare connections. Nothing extravagant, just real help for people trying to do it all alone. The first time I stood inside it, watching a young mother hold her toddler while filling out her first loan application, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Purpose. It wasn't about redemption anymore. It was about being useful. I used my network, quietly, without fanfare, to pull in mentors, volunteers, job leads. I stayed behind the scenes, working spreadsheets, brewing coffee, fixing flickering lights. I wanted no plaque, no name on the wall, just the chance to show up week after week. Then, one Thursday afternoon, I received an email from Emma. Subject, event invitation. No body, just a flyer attached. It was a speaking engagement. Emma had been invited to give a talk on resilience and advocacy at a local women's leadership summit. At the bottom, under special guests, was a line, accompanied by Thomas Whitaker. No title, no explanation, just my name. I showed up early, took a seat in the 3rd row, not the first. I wore a plain shirt and slacks, the kind that wouldn't draw attention. When she took the stage, I held my breath. Emma stood tall, her voice steady, her presence commanding. She spoke about the systems that fail women, the power of showing up, the importance of empathy over efficiency. Then, near the end, she paused. "I want to thank someone," she said, "who used to be a ghost in my life." The room fell silent. Someone I didn't think I'd ever see again, not in a meaningful way. She glanced at me, just a flicker, but it felt like the sun breaking through clouds. "I invited this person not because of who he used to be," she continued, "but because of who he has chosen to become." My hands trembled. For years, I told myself he didn't deserve a second chance. And maybe he didn't. She smiled, just barely. But then he showed up, not once, but over and over. He didn't ask for a spotlight. He asked for a broom, a clipboard, a seat in the back. She cleared her throat. And for the first time, I saw not the father I had lost, but the man who was finally willing to stay. She looked right at me now. "So today, I want to say something I've never said publicly." She inhaled. "Thank you, Dad. I don't remember the applause. I don't remember how I stood up, or whether I cried, or what I did with my hands. All I remember was that word, Dad. Not Thomas. Not you. Not a nod in passing. Dad. The word I had forfeited, and now, somehow, received again. Not as a right, but as a gift." After the event, we stood near the coffee table. She was speaking with friends, colleagues. She didn't rush toward me, but when she finished, she walked over. She didn't hug me, but she didn't turn away either. She just said, "Thanks for coming." And I replied, "I wouldn't have missed it." She nodded, then said, "There's a kid at the center, Jasmine. You should meet her. She reminds me of me." "I'd like that," I said. And in that moment, I realized the real transformation wasn't mine alone. It was ours. The camera was steady, the lighting soft. Just me, a wooden chair, and the quiet hum of a room I had learned to love. The reading nook at the Whitaker Center. I wasn't dressed in a suit. No script on my lap. Just a sweater Emma gave me last Christmas, and a mug of cold coffee I'd forgotten to drink. I hit record. "Hi," I began. "My name is Thomas Whitaker. Some of you know me as a former executive. Others might know me as a volunteer. A few maybe as a father trying to learn how to be one." I looked directly into the lens. "I want to tell you something I learned too late." I took a breath. If your child ever calls you a guest at their life's most important moments, if they don't list you under family, but attendee, then somewhere along the line, you made a wrong turn. I let that sink in. I made that turn, more than once. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. I used to think time was currency I could earn back. That absence could be paid off with gifts, apologies, grand gestures. But time doesn't work like that. And neither does love. There was a pause. Your kids don't need your trophies. They need your presence. They need your hands building dollhouses, not boardrooms. Your voice cheering in bleachers, not just board meetings. Your heart actually in the room. I looked down for a moment, then back up. But here's the thing. I smiled faintly. If you get a second chance, take it. Not to restore your name, not to fix your image, but to love without condition. To show up not for credit, but because you finally understand what you missed. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded photo. Emma, age 4, covered in finger paint, beaming at the camera. I held it up. She used to wait for me at the window every night. I never came. By the time I was ready to knock, the door had already closed. I set the photo down, but I waited outside that door, every day, with letters, with silence, with nothing to offer but patience and truth. I looked into the lens again, and eventually she opened it, just enough. My voice softened, and I walked through, not as the father she remembered, but as the man willing to earn a seat, even if it was in the last row. I leaned back in the chair, took one final sip from the mug, then nodded. If there's someone out there waiting at a door, don't knock once and leave. Wait. Sit. Be still. I ended the video with 6 words. Not too late if you stay. That video wasn't for the internet. It wasn't for followers. It was for the center's archive, part of a mentorship series for young fathers, single parents, broken families looking for something solid to hold. Emma watched it 2 weeks later. She didn't call, but she sent a text. You stayed. And that was enough. I now spend my Tuesdays reading stories to toddlers who don't know I once negotiated billion-dollar contracts. On Fridays, I clean the floors before the weekend rush. On Sundays, I write my letters still, though now they're shorter, more present tense. Emma visits the center sometimes, never announced, just appears, brings cookies, chats with staff. Once she even brought her husband. We don't talk about the past much. We don't need to, because we're writing something new. And this time, I'm not missing a single chapter.